bless our meeting today. We ask this in your name, the God of heaven and earth who created us all. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, take it away, the introducer. Oh, Kim is here, and she's going to be introduced as our speaker today.
Hello, I'm not sure what just popped up there.
Yeah, Kim will be our speaker next week.
Oh, next week. I'm sorry, I thought it was this week. Oh, okay. Bob, will you introduce the speaker then?
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. Our speaker today is Alex Painter. He's the Associate Director of Admissions at Earlham College, and he has written 2 books. First of all, Alex was born and raised in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and came to Richmond as a first year at Earlham College in 2006. He graduated in 2010, having studied American history and politics. He is a passionate baseball researcher and fan, particularly in regards to the Negro Leagues and his Cleveland Indians. He has written 2 books. The first in 2018, titled Folk Hero Forever. It's about the life of Luke Easter, as well as his 2020 book, which we'll be talking about today, Blackball in the Hoosier Heartland, Unearthing the Negro League's History of Richmond, Indiana, an exhaustive chronicle of local history, baseball history, and Negro League baseball history, all in one. He has also written for Bleacher Report, and his work will be featured in the upcoming issue of Touching the Bases, the newsletter for the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League Players Association. Alex lives in Richmond and works as the Associate Director of Admissions at Earlham College, is married to Alicia, and she works at the Boys and Girls Club of Wayne County. They have 3 children, son Grayson, and twin daughters, Eleanor and Harper. He's a couple of trivia things. I learned in his book that MC Henley sold the first bicycle to Wilbur Wright here in Richmond. And he also can tell us some extensive things about a famous player from this area, from Spiceland, John Snowball Merida, who he has taken a special interest in. So help us give a warm, personal Kiwanis welcome to a delightful young man, Alex Painter.
What a kind introduction. Can everybody see me and hear me? I'm assuming yes. I'm assuming audio and visual are firing on all cylinders. I'll move a little closer to the microphone here. Bob, I have to tell you, great introduction, and that background is impeccable, I will say.
Wonderful, thank you.
And of course, Kansas City Monarchs hats also noted. So I'll just kind of underscore a bit of that very kind introduction. Yes, my name is Alex Painter. I do live here in Richmond, and this year to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Negro Leagues. I guess I started this whole project in 2019 with plans to release it in 2020. I researched and wrote this, Blackball in the Hoosier Heartland, Unearthing the Negro Leagues Baseball History of Richmond. And as Bob kind of mentioned, I've been a baseball fan pretty much my entire life. I love baseball history. I always have. And ever since I was in probably elementary school, I've taken an affinity to the Negro Leagues. And upon moving here to Richmond, I had heard stories about Satchel Paige All-Stars coming to Barnstorm here against the Bob Feller All-Stars here in Richmond, or perhaps the fact that Josh Gibson hit the longest home run. And we'll talk about Josh and the barnstorming games here in a moment. So I really started the book to really kind of ground that into, as much, contemporary accounts as I could, mostly originally born out of curiosity. And then the next thing I knew, I was really deep into this. And so I will talk about a little bit about the Negro Leagues history of Richmond in this presentation, but there's also just some really, really funny tidbits from early baseball history in Richmond as well. So if you don't mind, I'll share my screen. So I guess if you have a question, feel free to type it in the box, the chat box, and we can get to them afterwards. I will be very timely, I promise, because I know you folks have important business to attend to in your own right. But I do want to thank you all very much for having me. As Bob can attest, if you are interested in this book, I'll do socially distanced sit-down discussions. Be more than happy to talk to any of you about baseball, about the book, local history, whatever have you. So, all right, let me go ahead and do this real quick. All right. Can everybody, don't want to pull the wagon before the horse here. Can everybody see the screen, I assume? Okay.
No, Alex, we can't.
Oh,
You've killed your video. Now there you go.
There we go. I am so sorry here. All right, let me, from the beginning now. There we go. All right. Thanks, Mr. Gatchel. I appreciate that. All right, so let's start at the very, very beginning as far as baseball is concerned. And the very beginning of baseball in Richmond actually begins in the 1860s, where the Earlham College baseball team claimed the city championship of Richmond back in 1867. But there's not actually a whole lot there was not a whole lot written about that other than the fact that they claimed the city championship. So the way I think about it is the modern age of baseball in Richmond started in the 1880s. Now, the gentleman on the left is Thomas W. Bennett. Now, he served not one, not two, but three different stints as the mayor of Richmond. And he is actually the gentleman who contrived the idea to name the streets after letters and numbers, kind of like the game that we enjoy today. He was also the colonel of the 69th Indiana Infantry during the Civil War and territorial governor of Idaho. So he was a very well-accomplished man, and by all accounts, a good person. However, the man did not like baseball, and he was not unlike a lot of people then who thought that baseball was a game reserved for criminals, thieves, thuggish rogues, or worse in the eyes of many, Irish immigrants. And so he always, whenever his children were caught playing baseball, which was outlawed by the city in the 1880s, he would bring the children into his office and he would give them this stern lecture. And as reported by the Richmond Item, it went a little something like this. He would tell the story of one of his friends whose beauty, manly grace, and towering intellect were once the pride of his entire family, and how he gradually sank beneath the seductive influence of the deadly game until he went to his grave. A terrible evidence of what baseball will do to its victims. Yes, a little bit dramatic. And he would continue this until the youths who were in his office were in tears. And once they were crying, he would release them and he would fine them $5.65, which seems like pocket change, but at the time that equated to $142.34. So there was quite a monetary reason to not get caught playing baseball in the city of Richmond in the 1880s. So you had a mayor who was not super fond of the game, but you also had a college, Earlham, of course, that's where most of the games would take place. And in 1882, the Earlham College teaching faculty basically said, no more baseball, it's immoral, it's repugnant, basically saying, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So despite that, baseball thrived in the city of Richmond. It took a while to get their sea legs under them. And that is because of the entrance of the game locally by Micaiah C. Henley, who was the roller skating king. And yes, as Bob mentioned, he actually sold Wilbur Wright his first bicycle. So Henley kind of dabbled in a lot of different recreational activities, you know, whether it was polo or roller skating. And in 1885, it was the Henley Baseball Club. And so in 1885, the baseball club was formed and played 38 games across Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky. So let's kind of go, so that's kind of locally. So in 1885, then Richmond's baseball sea legs kind of start getting under them. And looks like I didn't do all the transitions properly on the next slide, so just bear with me here. So this is my incredibly simple timeline of Major League Baseball's racial history from 1860 to 1960. I don't know how I missed the three things here, but we'll make it work. Here's the timeline. So for argument's sake, let's start at 1860, where the game nationally really started gaining popularity and continued to gain popularity through the Civil War, because it was played in a lot of the Civil War camps. All right. So in 1876, the National League is formed, which for argument's sake is kind of the first modern professional league. All right. So in 1884, the final black player at the major league level, named Moses Fleetwood Walker, is expelled from his team because there was a gentleman's agreement that went into place, basically saying that no black players will be permitted to play at the minor or the major league level. All right, so let's just ground ourselves. We'll throw 1900, the turn of the century, in here. And so for 63 years, there was no black players essentially at the major league level until 1947, when Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier with the Brooklyn Dodgers. Now, I'm sure that most of you are probably familiar with this gentleman here, perhaps less with this gentleman, Moses Fleetwood Walker. But Jackie Robinson is, of course, incredibly famous. And one time every baseball season, every player will actually wear number 42 on the field across all the games to commemorate Mr. Robinson. Of course, very brave, very courageous. If you're ever curious on where to learn more about him, there's plenty of books out there and a really good movie called 42. So during this intermittent period, though, there were no black players at the major league level, as I mentioned. And so what ultimately happened is black players formed their own leagues. They kind of took on a variation of names. Sometimes they were called blackball teams. Sometimes they were called colored teams or colored leagues. And in 1920, the Negro National League was formed, which was really the first truly sophisticated formal Negro league. And so that's what we're celebrating the centennial of. So between 1907 and 1959, there were nearly 125 confirmed games involving Negro League teams played in Richmond, Indiana. And so these were famous teams like the Chicago American Giants, who played in Richmond 17 times. Courtesy of Bob's Hat, the Kansas City Monarchs came to Richmond 5 times. The Homestead Grays came to town 6 times. And of course, due to proximity, the Indianapolis Clowns came to Richmond 22 times. So why would they come to Richmond? Well, Negro League teams would barnstorm extensively, sometimes playing up to 200 games per year. And they would stop in during Richmond. Richmond, as we know, is situated nestled perfectly in the sense between major metropolitan areas such as Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Dayton, Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, wherever have you. And so oftentimes teams would come in, play a game in Richmond, and they would oftentimes use the funds that they'd get from the gates to, fill up the gas tank. So it was a really cool relationship because, of course, we would help the city, of course, would book these teams, and we would help kind of balance the financial ledgers. But meanwhile, the residents of Richmond got to see literal generational players. So part of my task was I wanted to log every one of these games. And there is an appendix in the back of the book that has every single one of the games, the result, and any notes about it. So that was number one. So after I logged all the games, I kind of told myself, what would have been really cool is if I would have logged all the players from each one of these games. And so what I did was then I started from the beginning, and then I started the player registry. So all told, over 350 Negro League players appeared with their teams in Richmond, including 19 members of the Baseball Hall of Fame, which is astonishing, absolutely astonishing. So, for instance, Josh Gibson, who some will say hit more home runs than anyone who's ever lived, played in Richmond 3 times. And we'll talk about one of his very famous hits here in Richmond. So one of the best power hitters in baseball history. Cool Papa Bell played here at least 3 times. And he was among the fastest players ever to play baseball. In fact, it was said that Cool Papa Bell was so fast he could turn off the light switch and be under the covers in his bed before the light went out. Satchel Paige, who is another Hall of Famer, a legend in his own right, has allegedly pitched 2,500 games in his career. These are this according to himself. Won 2,000 of them and threw a couple hundred no-hitters in there too. And Indianapolis native Oscar Charleston, who appeared here no fewer than 14 times, spanning several decades. And we'll talk a little bit more about Charleston here, but considered one of the very best players in baseball history. So this is just a small sampling of the Hall of Famers who played here in Richmond. So others, though not in the Hall of Fame, eventually did make it to Major League Baseball, including Luke Easter, who's kind of my personal hero, who I wrote a biography about, but he appeared here twice in 1946. He might have, according to my calculations and my tally, he hit nearly 630 home runs in his baseball career, spanning all leagues and all that. Sam the Jet Jethro, another speedster who was the Rookie of the Year in 1950 for MLB, came here with his Negro League team twice. Hank Thompson, who was the hero of the 1954 World Series, came here twice. And then who could forget the catcher for the 1962 Mets, widely regarded as one of the worst teams in baseball history. However, they had a very animated catcher named Choo-Choo Coleman, who came here with the Indianapolis Clowns in 1957. So one of the big discoveries of the book was, in fact, the discovery of the 1918 Richmond Giants. Now, this guy on the left here might resonate a bit. That's George Brem. He was a local sporting goods magnate. So this is him much, much later in life, by the way. But when he was a young man, he actually formed Richmond's own professional Negro League team called the Giants. Now, it wasn't uncommon that cities like Richmond would have these kinds of teams. However, the people who were on the team is what makes it really noteworthy, including Oscar Charleston, who, according to baseball historian Bill James, is the 4th best baseball player in the entire country, in the entire baseball history, pardon me. So across baseball history. He's also an extremely fiery kind of guy, and he was utterly fearless. Allegedly in the 1920s, when the Ku Klux Klan was at its almost got to be his pinnacle, he was playing a game with his mates, and after the game was over, the Klan circled this team bus and refused to let them go. It was alleged that Charleston walked right up to one of the men, plucked his hood off, threw it on the ground, and then told the team to get back on the bus. And I think he terrified the rest of the Klansmen, so they moved out of the way and let him go. So that's Oscar Charleston. He's a guy that allegedly could, hit you 50 home runs and steal you 100 bases in a year. He was fantastic. There was Jack Hannibal was on the Richmond Giants, and if he looks like, hey, that looks like a boxer, that's because he was. He was also known as the Indianapolis Iron Man, as well as the Fighting Poor Boy. He was a fantastic Negro League left fielder. Connie Day was also on the team, who was kind of like a defensive wizard back then, very flashy, very showy, and a fantastic infielder. And Bill Holland, who garnered the nickname Devil because he was just so incredibly ferocious and competitive, who actually only 3 players in Negro League history have struck out more guys than Bill Holland, and he made his professional debut with the Giants as a 17-year-old kid, and he played for about over 20 years. So a lot of times when cities, Richmond size, would have teams, there might be 1 or maybe 2 headlining players. However, Richmond was stocked with noteworthy and baseball players, Negro Leaguers who were very, very noteworthy and famous for the day, mostly Indianapolis-based. So in the 17 games between June and September of 1918, the Giants boasted nearly a .650 winning percentage and really would have been higher, but they ended up actually losing Charleston and Day to the war effort towards the end of the season. Okay, so that was actually a kind of a scoop, just particularly I was looking for something completely different and totally stumbled upon the Richmond Giants, but it is an incredibly noteworthy thing for us in our city. So here we go. This is Josh Gibson. First of all, I love how everybody's dressed for the game. I think that's fantastic. The next baseball game I go to, whenever it might be, I believe I will also put on a shirt and maybe a hat. But so Josh Gibson, as I mentioned, was one of the most famous home run hitters of the day. And so just to give you a quick timeline, on August 6, 1936, Municipal Stadium McBride, as we call it now, officially opened. So that stadium, I don't know if people realize this, is 84 years old. But 639 days later, on May 7, 1938, Gibson and the Homestead Grays square off against the Indianapolis Sterlings. And Gibson has an absolute day. He hits for the cycle, so he hit a single, a double, a triple, and a home run. However, he was the first player to hit a home run over the left field fence. The first player in history of the field. So 639 days later, the first time it happens, and it's Gibson. And it was 412 feet down the line. So by all accounts, the ball actually landed on Peacock, if you're familiar with that road. So what's really cool is, so he was the first person to do it, and nobody was able to do it again for over 3,300 days until May 31st, 1947, when Bob Verrier of the Richmond Roses, a minor league team, hit the first home run over the left field fence, the first time. Dixon did it in 1938. But according to the paper, the fences had been moved in at least 12 feet because it was 400 feet down the line as opposed to 412. So only after the fences were moved in was Gibson's prodigious feat able to be duplicated. And so I think it's really cool for, the local history that perhaps the most famous home run was hit by perhaps one of the best home run hitters in baseball history. Which brings us then to another really cool chapter in Richmond's history, and that was on October 10th, 1946, when Bob Feller's All-Stars squared off against Satchel Paige's All-Stars. So Bob Feller's All-Stars were, of course, all white, and Satchel Paige's All-Stars were all Negro Leaguers. So this is actually an original clipping from the Palladium item. As you can see, you could actually buy tickets. Of course, Kessler's, most of us remember Kessler's, but Brem's, which was also a sporting goods store, of course, founded by George Brem. So that was on October 10th, 1946. And so that was a barnstorming tour. So basically the baseball season was over. So these two players gathered their bands of players and they traveled and they would play, these all-star games. And so they did stop in Richmond on October 10th. But what makes their stop in Richmond so significant is that if you look at the places they played, they were playing major league stadiums: Comiskey Park, Forbes Field, Cleveland Municipal Stadium, Yankee Stadium, Crosley Field, and then they ended up in Chicago again on the backside of the tour. And so, of course, Richmond's not right here. So I think that's why it's incredibly unique that they stopped here and played. And just, an interesting quirk, honestly, in Richmond baseball history. But these teams, make no mistake, were fantastic. So on the Feller All-Stars, there were 3 Hall of Famers, including Feller himself, Bob Lemon, and shortstop for the Yankees, Phil Rizzuto. And amongst the team, there were 66 combined All-Star game appearances. And then on the Page All-Stars, you had Page, who himself is a Hall of Famer, and a pitcher who, by some accounts, was just as good and perhaps better than Page, named Hilton Smith. But 5 of Page's team would go on to break Major League Baseball's color barrier, which again fell the following season, 1947, with Jackie. And 3 of the players would ultimately sign minor league contracts. So there was some great collection of players who played in Richmond. And this is probably, it has to be among the absolute best collection of players who ever came and played in Richmond. So those are just a few stories from the book. I want to be mindful of time here. So, what's next for me personally? So as Bob mentioned, I am absolutely enamored with a ball player from Spiceland, Indiana. And his name is John Merida. His nickname is Snowball because despite being 6 foot and 200 pounds, he was enormous, but he was extremely kind. He had a very cheery disposition, so people just called him Snowball. But he's from Spiceland, Indiana, which is, of course, just in neighboring Henry County. And so I'm working through this, actually. I've got most of the script written. I'm really excited to share it because it's an incredible, incredible story. But he's really interesting because all throughout the early 1900s, Merida actually played as the only black player on white teams all over Indiana, which, again, this is decades before Jackie Robinson made his debut. So it's quite a story, and he is considered at the time among the greatest ball players in the state and in the country. But it was recognized that this guy should be playing in the major leagues, but he obviously can't. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now. And then I'm also kind of starting to formalize some kind of official campaign, because I do believe, given the breadth of the history of the Negro Leagues here in Richmond, and as well as the discovery of the 1918 Giants, and particularly who they had on the team, that I'm of the mind that some kind of marker or placard needs to go in somewhere around the city, preferably Glenn Miller Park, where the team played. So I'm kind of going through doing some fact finding and kind of going through the proper channels as far as what that might take and all of that. So getting the logistical things, and then fundraising can possibly come later. But this is probably something that I'm going to be tirelessly working towards here in the very near future. So that's actually the end of my little PowerPoint. And I would be remiss not to mention that I just mentioned a few of the stories, and there are literally dozens and dozens of stories that are kind of spotted throughout Richmond's history. And it was a completely untold history, and it is exhilarating, and it was exhilarating to research, and it was really interesting to write too and kind of chronicle. And so the book itself is kind of a local baseball history, it's a Negro League history, it's a little bit of everything sewn up very chronologically. So, all right, let me jump out here.
Alex, there are some questions in the chat box.
All righty.
The first one is more of a comment, I think. It says the rescheduled celebration of Jackie Robinson Day for 2020 is August 28th. So that's coming up in August.
Fantastic.
Then we had a question. Was the Indianapolis ABCs related to the Indy Clowns?
Oh, that's a great question. And so John Merida was actually a member of the ABCs, and that's where he kind of crosses into the Negro League's purview. So that was actually two separate franchises. So they were actually two different teams. The Indianapolis ABCs predate the Clowns by several decades. The ABCs started in the early 1900s, and they were charter members of the Negro National League in 1920. But they ultimately, I think they disbanded in the mid-30s, which was, and then the Clowns came to Indianapolis in the early to mid-1940s. And of course, the Clowns are really noteworthy, aside from having Choo Choo Coleman, who was one of my favorite guys and one of my favorite nicknames in baseball history. Hank Aaron actually played for the Clowns for about a month, and we just missed them. Just missed having Aaron play in Richmond, which that would have been amazing. He was a teenager on the Indianapolis Clowns.
Next question I see was, when was the Negro Baseball Hall of Fame started, and where is it?
Oh, it's a great question. So it's actually not necessarily a Hall of Fame. I mean, I'm splitting hairs here. It's a museum that when you walk through it, it absolutely feels like a Hall of Fame, but they don't actually induct members into it. But it is more of a museum. It was I'm trying to remember the exact year, but Buck O'Neill, who played in Richmond a number of times as well, who was a living Negro Leagues legend. And if you've ever seen Ken Burns baseball, oh, Buck O'Neill he just gets in there right next to your heart. He was one of those people who helped get the museum going. It's in Kansas City, Missouri. And so I believe it was founded in the late 90s. I could be wrong, or maybe early 2000s.
Those are the only questions in the chat box.
Alex, I have a question.
Yes,
And then
Bob.
at Glenn Miller Park. Of course, there's no ball field at Glenn Miller Park now, but could you talk about Exhibition Stadium and maybe some of the other parks that are no longer around that people played at?
I'd love to, Bob. Fantastic. So the first true ballpark in Richmond was called Athletic Park. And it was actually kind of, for argument's sake, right about where Test Field is now. So it's kind of funny. Whenever I take my son Grayson there, he's 6, we go for batting practice over there. We call it John Merida Field because Merida played on Athletic Park. Anyways, so there's that field. That was where the Cincinnati Reds actually played twice when they came to Richmond, which is chronicled in the book. Then there was Driving Park, which was kind of, it was where the Arboretum was, but it currently is kind of where the Menards, Kohl's, and Best Buy parking lot is now. There was actually like a oval track where people would take their automobiles and drive around. There was a baseball field there, so there was an old baseball field there too. And then, of course, Exhibition Park, which was, it's called Richmond's $12,000 gym. It cost $12,000 to build a ballpark then, was on the grounds of Glenn Miller Park. And that's where, until it burned down in 1935, that was the main park for all these bases. So the Richmond Giants played there, and most of the games that happened before it burned down in 1935, between 1917 and 1935, happened there. Pardon me. It's noteworthy because if any of you have ever seen the movie Bull Durham, if you've ever seen that movie, there's a giant bull on the outfield fence, which if you hit with a baseball, you got, you get a prize, whatever. So our exhibition park actually had that same bull because Bull Durham Tobacco was one of our sponsors. So there was an enormous bull that if one of the players hit, they'd get like $25 or $50 from the Bull Durham Tobacco Company. So, and then of course McBride, municipal at the time, has been the Richmond's main field since 1936.
Alex,
Good answer.
my daughter lives outside of Cleveland in Solon, and because of her son-in-law, we adopted the Cleveland teams. It's frustrating as our teams also. And while you were talking, I went into my closet and got this one of my favorite T-shirts, and on the back is someone that you mentioned.
Absolutely. Old number 19, Bob Feller himself.
And then I got a vintage T-shirt, and it says the Cleveland Indians established 1901, and unfortunately there's only two years on this, 1920 and 1948. They almost won one a few years ago against the Cubs, but it rained and the Cubs came back. So anyway, we've been to some games there, and with the chief up in the top row of center field drumming. I don't know if some of that's going to change now. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you, and I also had a question. Who was the first black player for the Cincinnati Reds, if you know?
Oh yeah. So I do. So first of all, I'm a huge Cleveland baseball fan.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, it's tough. It's not easy.
Yeah.
And I have 6 brothers and 3 sisters. I'm the second oldest of 10. We are all diehards, and yeah, we've been through the ringer. Anyways, I believe the first black player on the Reds team, on the Cincinnati Reds, Chuck Hinton. Am I remembering that correct? I almost want to go back. That's the name that's sticking out in my mind. But he would have predated Frank Robinson by a few years, I think, or a couple years. Chuck Harmon, thank you. Oh, my sister who's on the call I got my Chuck Hinton, Chuck Harmon. So it's Chuck Harmon. She just messaged me. So there we go. Thanks, Nora.
We do have a couple people that are on iPhones. I believe there's a Deb and there's a Chris. If you guys can just give us your names for attendance purposes, we want to make sure we count you as a guest. So unmute yourself at some point and holler a name. And if anybody has any more questions for Alex, please ask them now.
I believe, Jennifer, the Deb might be my mom. Call in from
I was
Fort
gonna say, I think that's your mom.
Hey, since we're talking stats, my mom is the mother to 10 children, so that's pretty dang impressive.
Wow. Alex, I know you're a history major and you really get into this. What can you tell us about some of the gems of Richmond history, or what you found out, or what you think's important?
Yeah, no, Bob, one of it you're obviously intimately familiar with, and that is kind of the trajectory of the Star Piano Company, of course, which began in the 1870s with a single piano builder named George Trazer, I believe was his name. And then it ultimately, Star Piano and Jeanette Records kind of merged together. And it is such a, I know we talk about the jazz here a lot, but it is just, Richmond and jazz are so inexorably connected. So there is that. But however, really, I was doing a lot of digging about the depot. And something that a lot of people might not know is that Abraham Lincoln's body on his tour from Washington, D.C. back home to Springfield, Illinois, actually stopped here in Richmond. And it was in the dead of the morning. I think it was sometime between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. And I mean, nearly everybody in town came out to pay respects in kind of a hastily put together commemoration for President Lincoln. So he was big here, he had come through his body anyways, which was really cool for the city. I know to be able to mourn very very intimately with that event. Let's see what else. Yeah, the Cincinnati Reds. Going back to baseball, the Cincinnati Reds have played no fewer than 4 games here, exhibition games, and it was very common for them to do so. Let's see. Of course, Micaiah C. Henley is a very noteworthy local resident. I'm trying to think of something I haven't touched on already, Bob.
Well, that's great. I appreciate it.
Alex, what's happening with IU East in the middle of all this going forward this school year?
So over at Earlham, well, where I am, Earlham.
You're at Earlham?
I am, yes.
Oh,
yes.
I thought they said IU East earlier. So okay, I'm sorry. What's
Oh,
going on
no.
with Earlham then?
Yes, I'm over here at Earlham, and we're doing 2 mini mesters. So we're doing our plan is to reopen and just kind of get the social distancing and all the safety precautions in place. 2 mini mesters, small semesters, and we'll release in around Thanksgiving, and then we're doing an online J term in January, and then our students will come back in February for 2 more mini mesters. So like every other college and university, we follow the plan and we're hoping to stick to it as closely as we can.
Alex, can you tell us
the
a bit about the Painter family and how you ended up at Earlham, and what other members of the family have come to Earlham?
Oh, of course. So yeah, I came to Rome in 2006. My brother Adam followed me in 2007, and we are a football playing family, and baseball for that matter. But football was a big deal. We all played for Snyder High School. I'm not trying to gas ourselves or the high school up. As far as Indiana football programs are concerned, that's a pretty daggone good program. So, however, Adam and I went to Earlham. He graduated in 11. I graduated in 10. Adam was a pitcher 2 years for the Richmond River Rats, the first 2 years. And then he actually pitched professionally for a summer with the Florence Freedom down in Florence, Kentucky. And again, not to gas us up here, but typically kind of an athletic family. My sister Nora, who I'm not sure if she's on the call currently, but she was earlier, she plays volleyball at Xavier University. She's a Division I player, and she is an absolute monster on the court. But we've had a couple other brothers play at Indiana State, so Division I football school. We're kind of spread out throughout the Midwest now, but my mom definitely produced some very athletic children, and even some of us might even be halfway intelligent too. So, but anyways, so that's a big Catholic family, as you mentioned. In Northern Indiana, if you have 10 children in your family, you get asked, are you Catholic or are you Irish? Are you Amish? And so we're the former, not the latter.
Alex, there was one more comment in the chat box. It says there is an archived article dated December 23rd, 1956 from the PAL item. It includes photos. I found it on a Google search and listed on newspaper.com. Search for Exhibition Park, Richmond, Indiana. So apparently there's a picture of the park.
Apps. I've bookmarked it right now.
It's dated December 23rd, 1956 for anybody that wants to look that up as well. If there are no other questions, I think, John, you can take it back over. Alex, thank you very, very much. That was awesome. These are
Thank you.
quiet
And
claps.
if I may, I will put my email address in the chat box. Don't hesitate to reach out if you want to talk baseball or local history, anything. You can reach me at that address.
And I assume you still have copies of the book that you can sell anybody that is interested as well, correct?
I sure do. Lots of them. So if you want to take at least one off my hands, I'd be very appreciative. Only $15, and like it comes with a conversation. I'd be happy to speak with anyone about it. But yeah, just feel free to let me know.
You can contact Alex or myself, and I'll make sure you get connected with him as well. John, it's all you.
Thank you all.
John, you're not unmuted yet. Unmute yourself. There you go.
I really appreciated this very, very much. When I grew up, I was a huge Cleveland Indian fan. I would listen to every game that I could, except during the time when you're in school. And I remember that great pitcher, Bob Fellow. He was awesome. So thank you again. Appreciate it very much. Well, we haven't got much time. We'll have to go quickly. Couple of announcements here. For birthdays, we have Liz DiMao. It's on the 27th. And then we have a couple people for an anniversary. Jeff and Catherine Elbert. They're celebrating their sixth, and Matt and Mary Napolti, 41 years. So congratulations to all those. And I would like to remind everybody to keep collecting your pop and beer can tabs. This benefits Riley Hospital. We haven't been getting any collected for quite a long time, so remember to do that. We do have 2 meetings afterwards. They're both going to be very quick. Does anybody have any other announcements or things you'd like to share or need to?
What's next week's program, Bob?
Next week's program is Third Grade Academy. And, we are a sponsor of that. So anyway, they've got an update on what happened this summer and should be pretty interesting.
Well, the programs have been really good, and it's if we can't meet in person, it's nice to do it the way we do it, and all the programs have been excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, Jennifer, how many did we have today?
29.
Hey, that's our top. That's
We
our
had
record
21
for the
members and 8 guests.
Wow.
I had the whole Painter family, I think.
I can give a quick IU East update if that was a question.
Sure.
About, 16% of our classes will be face-to-face. After computing social distancing requirements, most of our classrooms hold about 12. But we do have a full schedule of both face-to-face, hybrid, and online classes. We begin August 24th. Our face-to-face meetings will end the week before Thanksgiving, and all classes will go online after Thanksgiving. There are going to be some face-to-face student activities on campus. Even if students aren't in face-to-face classes, there'll be some things for them to engage in. So we're looking forward to it. We have lots of plans and we'll see where that goes. But for now, August 24th.
What percentage did you say?
About 16.5%.
Will there be any athletics at all this year?
They're planning on that. We're waiting on the River States Conference and the NAIA to have some guidance. But for now, my understanding is the practices will start, if not after Labor Day, then just right before. So we're still waiting on that, as are a lot of places. Thank you.
I have one announcement. I'll throw $1 in. My wife has been making masks to wear, you know, out in public and so on. She just made a bunch of them for Richmond Community Schools that teachers will use. And we have some extra ones. If anyone needs a mask, just send me an email or give me a telephone call. We'll get one to you. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other announcements? Any happy buck time?
Yes, I have an announcement. We would like to have a Safety Village cleanup on August the 8th. That will be 2 weeks from tomorrow. Even though we're not having camp or many activities out there, if we don't have a cleanup day, it's going to be called Safety Village the Jungle. It's starting to get very overtaken by growth, especially with all the rain that we've had and heat that we've had recently. So August the 8th for a cleanup day. If you want to social distance and want to volunteer but don't feel like you should come out, if you'll contact me or Dana, we can give you gate pass or the codes to the gates, and you can go in and spend an hour pulling weeds and or just cleaning up. So, but August the 8th with a rain date of the following weekend if need be. So, so Safety Village cleanup, our signature project. So
What time, Brad?
8 a.m. to noon, or 8 a.m. until we're done. So usually last time it was probably about 2.5 hours when we were done. So
Thank you, Brad. Are
John?
there any other announcements?
I'll throw in $5 for a happy bucks for the Painter family. I know their children very well. I work with Alicia every day and they're a great family. So you can put me down for that, just honoring them.
All right, any other happy buck? Okay, if there is nothing else, we are finished.
But don't leave.
Yes,
Don't leave.
we now have the annual meeting, and I call it to order. And are there any businesses that needs to be brought before our group?
Lauren, you'll have to unmute yourself. Thank you. You're good.
Any business? If not, I need a motion to close the meeting.
So moved.
moved. Oh,
Second.
go ahead.
All in favor say K.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Yeah, enthusiastic. At this time, Don, you need to deal with the board meeting. We just need to, we have one thing that's for business for your meeting, Don. And Lauren,
Yes.
you have an announcement?
Yes, I'm submitting my resignation as secretary effective September 30th. as required by the international bylaws.
Okay,
I
Laura,
move,
go ahead.
I move to accept his resignation.
Second,
Who seconded?
Jeff.
Jeff. Okay. All in favor, say K.
Okay,
Okay.
Okay. Jennifer, you have an announcement?
I do. I make a motion to elect Lauren as our secretary starting October 1 of 2020.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor, say K.
Okay.
Okay.
I believe that's all the business that we have.
Correct.
Okay. Well, thank you. I really enjoyed that speaker today. He had me right there, especially when he talked about Cleveland Indians. Okay. Well, we'll see you next week. Have a good week, everyone.
You too, John.
Everybody mask up on Monday.